It was the beginning of school. It was the day right before school starts. And Mrs. Wilson was in her classroom getting it beautiful for all the children. She was putting up charts, creating the reading center, creating the writing center, getting a nice little cubby there for the art center. She was wanting that room to be perfect. Once she got the room all straight, she fixed her desk. She had her lesson plan book right smack in the middle. Then she put her stapler right on her desk. She loved to be organized. She had her paper clips, she had her tape dispenser, and she had her pencils. Now the room was ready for the children and ready for her too. Well, the next morning when she got to school, she went to the door as the bell rang and greeted every child as they walked in her room, telling them how glad she was that they got to be in her room this year and that they were going to have a great year. Well, everybody sat down in their seats and they were ready to go. She was telling them about the rules and the routines in her room. They took a walk through and saw all the centers, and they got themselves established into a routine. Day after day, they came in and did about the same thing. Everybody was happy, having a wonderful time. Well, one day, Mrs. Wilson came in her room, and she saw something was missing from her desk. Well, when the children came in that morning and got all settled and routines were finished, she said, "Boys and girls, I have a problem. I can't find my stapler." Susie stood up and she said, "Well, it was over there yesterday. We were using it in the art center." So everybody flocked over there and looked around. It wasn't there. They looked around the whole room trying to find that stapler, and it was just nowhere to be found. Well, Mrs. Wilson said, "It'll show up sometime. Let's get back to work." Well, day after day after day, it just never showed up. She finally had to go out and look for another one. But in the meantime, when the children came in the next morning, something else was missing. Mrs. Wilson looked at her desk and she said, "This is strange. Things keep disappearing." So when the children came in and got settled, they said, "Mrs. Wilson, you look worried." She said, "Yes, I can't find the tape dispenser." Well, a couple of the boys stood up and said, "Well, we used it over there in the writing center to tape up our writing." So everybody flocked over there to look around and see what was there. Lots of things were there, but not the stapler or the tape dispenser. So now two things are missing. Ms. Wilson said, "This is not good. Something is taking our supplies." And the children looked at each other and they said, "Not me. I don't know where it went." Well, things were getting she was getting a little worried. So she said, "Well, if you're the one who's bothering these things, just put them back on my desk, please." Well, day after day went by and nobody put anything back on her desk. And one morning when they came in, something else was missing. Mrs. Wilson didn't even go through the morning routine. She said, "Children, sit down. We have a serious problem. Stealing is wrong. Somebody is taking things from this classroom without permission, and I need to know who it is. If we can't figure this out, we're going to have to get the principal involved." The children said, "Oh no, please don't get her involved." But nobody confessed to taking the things. So Mrs. Wilson went in and had a talk with the principal. She said, "Well, let's see if things appear in the next few days. If not, I'll come talk to your children." Well, after the next few days, nothing showed up. Nobody said anything. And then one day, something else went missing. Well, Ms. Wilson said, "This is it." She went straight to the principal. She said, "Somebody is breaking into my room and stealing all my things. This has got to stop." So that morning, after the morning routine, the principal came in Dr. Williams was the principal, and she said, "Children, there is a terrible problem in this room. There is nothing else happening all over the school. It's just in this room. Someone is stealing from Mrs. Wilson, and it has got to stop. If you are the one that has taken her things and you turn them in when nobody's looking, there'll be no consequences. But if by this time tomorrow things have not shown up, we will have to get the deputy involved because this is wrong. You do not steal." And then she left. Well, that afternoon, Mrs. Wilson decided to read the book called The Stranger's Magic Stick. It's a fiction book, but it talks about honesty and trustworthiness and being responsible for things. And so she thought this would be a good time to share this book with the children. And she did. Well, the next day when the kids came in, things were still missing from Mrs. Wilson's desk. But one of the boys noticed there was a trail of paper clips on the floor. And they followed a straight line. They went down, down, down to the corner of the room, and then they stopped. Well, this got Mrs. Wilson to thinking, maybe it's not a child that broke into this room. And she went and got the custodian. He came with his ladder, and he looked up in the ceiling. He raised that tile, looked up in the ceiling, and he was shocked. He found that there was a basket up there that an animal had dragged up there, and inside that basket was the pencil holder, the stapler, the paper clips, and the tape dispenser. That animal had dragged this basket up there as his nest, and he was hoarding all these things because they were shiny, and he liked to put them in his nest. So then the custodian got a trap and put up in that attic. And he said, "We'll watch and see what we catch." And after a couple days, the kids were sitting in their seats doing their writing. The room was very quiet. They heard a scampering up there. Then they heard a click, and that click was the cage door closing. The custodian came, and he went up the ladder and raised the ceiling tile. And what do you guess he had caught in his cage? Any idea? It was a raccoon. The raccoon had found a way to get into that attic and climb down that pole in the corner, and he was having a ball in that room just taking things. Well, the custodian took the raccoon and he put him in his truck and he drove him way out in the country where he could live among the trees away from the school building and not cause havoc ever again. Mrs. Wilson got all of her things back and the classroom got back to normal. But those children had a tale to tell when the day was over. And by the end of the week, the whole school had found out what had happened in Mrs. Wilson's room.